Hello, welcome to this Blu-ray edition of Jason and the Argonauts. I'm Peter Jackson, and I'm here with Randy Cook.
And we're looking at what is probably the best presentation of this classic fantasy film any of you will ever see. It's produced by Charles Schneer and special effects by Ray Harryhausen. The seventh film they made together, I believe, and it's a wonderful thing to behold. And they're a unique team, weren't they, Peter?
Well, they're a very unique team because Charles Schneer was a producer. He produced a few other movies apart from the films with Harryhausen, but basically from the early 1950s, just about everything that Ray Harryhausen was involved in as a visual effects animator, that was produced by Charles Schneer. It was almost like Charles Schneer was his benefactor in a way, that Ray Harryhausen had this wonderfully unique talent for bringing these small rubber puppets to life through stop-motion animation, and Charles Schneer was his partner and produced the movies for him. And, without Charles Schneer, I think Harryhausen's career would have gone a very different way, and I'm sure nowhere near as fulfilling.
His work was not limited to the special effects realm, of course. He's also in many ways, the auteur of the film, in that he came up with the idea, and he did virtually every creative job, or laid every creative piece of foundation for the film itself, as well as doing the technical work.
I've seen an alternative title for the film, Jason and the Golden Fleece. I've actually seen that printed in one of these credit cards at the front, and I think they had that name as the title of the film right up until the release, and then they realized that Steve Reeves, an Italian muscle builder, a movie had just come out starring him called Jason and the Golden Fleece, so they had to change the name and redo the title card. Neither Randy or I were involved in the production of Jason and the Argonauts. I was born in 1961, and the movie was kind of made during 61, 62, and released in 63. So I was a baby, if I was lucky enough to be a baby, when this material was being shot.
I was 10 years older, but behaving like a baby, and thrilled by this film when it came out, because really there was nothing quite like it going at the time.
No, although it really came in because of the time-consuming nature of the film. It did take them a couple of years to make because of the stop-motion animation. And by the time it was released, unfortunately, there was a flood of muscle builder kind of movies from Italy, much inferior films to this, and films that don't have great monsters and great visual effects. But it did get lost in a little mini flood of similar themed films, unfortunately. Just a case of very bad timing.
No,
because it stands head and
right.
shoulders above, the so-called competition.
Well, yeah, and that's an amazing thing about this film and about Ray, who we can talk about in a minute. Those of you who don't know much about Ray Harryhausen, I don't know how you've stumbled upon this film, but we'll try to clue you in a little about him. But Jason was not, as Peter says, as successful as they had hoped. Although when I saw it at age 12, theater was packed, and the kids who saw it went nuts.
It had a $3.5 million budget, which I don't know really how that stacks up for similar pictures around that time, but it seems like quite a lot of money for 1963.
Well, the top of the line about that time was Cleopatra, which was $40 million. And, of course, that was an outrageous amount of money. I can't tell you what the average is, but I can tell you that's as high as it got, and this is certainly not as low as it got. But there are many typical Schneer bits of cost cutting, including the stock shots, which he used in every film, and some of the early battle scenes here that don't feature Niall McGuinness, the actor. Not Niall McGuinness. Douglas Wilmer. Sorry, I should remember him. He was in several of Harryhausen's pictures, but Douglas Wilmer.
You get the feeling that Douglas Wilmer's actually composited in the foreground in a couple of these shots, don't you?
Yeah.
He's, it's almost as if they've taken a stock footage shot and they've put their actor in front of a screen.
Yeah, it's. I don't think that's the case, but it certainly feels like it. One of the things that is interesting about director Don Chaffee, who was a director for hire, as all the people on the Harryhausen Schneer pictures were. Ray and Charles would plan out the picture very carefully before the director was even brought on, based around the visual effects sequences. But the thing that's interesting to this, and I'd like you to speak to it maybe, Pete, if you would, is the fact that almost all the shots are static camera on sticks and with maybe a pan or a tilt, but all the action is within the frame. All the actors are choreographed in a very active way within the frame, you know?
Yeah. Because, I mean, the nature of the stop-motion animation, which is the visual effect that Ray Harryhausen, you know, specialized in, that, for technical reasons, you really couldn't move the camera. Other than there's a couple of examples in the film as we watch it where we do see the camera move, but most of the time, because it involves taking a plate that's been photographed and having to do a split screen where you're splitting the frame into two pieces and sandwiching them back together again with a monster in the middle, it doesn't really work, certainly with the technology of the time, to be able to move that camera around. It has to be locked off as if it's a static portrait. So really, I guess whether it was intentional or not, you know, most of the rest of the movie is shot with static frames as well. So that, and that is also a classic cost-saving measure, that it's always going to be cheaper to shoot a movie with the camera in a static position than to be pushing it around on a dolly or a crane.
But it makes it for a nice, it's a nice complement to the rest of the film.
It gives it a classical feel. I mean, it does give the film a class, and it does, as you were saying, it puts the onus on the director to create all the interest value by what's happening in the frame. Because nowadays, especially with modern filmmaking, we all do it where we're moving the camera a lot, and the camera also almost becomes another performer. It's like the camera's an actor, and the camera can hide a lot of flaws if you're whipping it around and moving and panning and shaking it, and it's doing all this crazy stuff. You can actually get away with things that these guys couldn't get away with it, because we've got plenty of time to watch what's happening. So they, you know, it's a cost-saving measure, but it does put a lot of emphasis on the director having to stage interesting compositions. And look at this picture here, how composed it is, how all the figures are standing there. They're just inside the frame. And it's composed as a painting. You know, there's a lot of artistry goes into setting these shots up and figuring out where everybody's got to stand.
Well, especially with the gods, who are photographed in almost, you know, the perfect fashion. Not only do they have this little mist around them, but more important, to make them imposing, they're always shot from below their eye level, unless they're looking down from the skies at the characters whose lives they are controlling. And then we're up above them looking into their television screen, which isn't a TV on the wall, it's a pond, which basically they're looking through the clouds at the puny mortals below. I mean, it's a very simple approach, but it's highly effective, I think.
There's Honor Blackman, who's about a year before she did her classic Pussy Galore role in Goldfinger.
You're a woman of many parts, Hera.
Yes.
She's just
come off the Avengers on British TV. She was Kathy Gale in the very early Avengers TV series, one of my favorite TV shows.
Yeah, and she's like all the actors in this picture. She's very fine, and for my money, she's a lot better looking than the various statues of her that they build during the course of the picture. Here's another one of those the gods look down moments, which I think is just right for what it is, you know?
So it's interesting to talk a little about Schneer and Harryhausen, because in a way we're seeing the use of stop motion to tell mythology for almost the first time, because stop motion had traditionally been developed for monsters and for dinosaurs, really, for King Kong, you know, the Lost World, dinosaurs, especially during the 1950s, where there were there were monstrous aberrations of creatures from outer space and various things which utilized stop motion. So there was a genre that had been developed around the technique, or that, you know, it's almost like one served the other. But what Schneer and Harryhausen deserve a lot of credit for was really thinking, what can we do with this magical technique where we bring puppets to life, and they pioneered the idea of using it in Arabian Nights tales with Sinbad, and mythology such as Jason, and classic stories like Jules Verne, Mysterious Island, which I think was the one just before this picture, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Sinbad, of course, was the first one that really broke out of the natural history, albeit aberrant natural history, mold with the gorillas and the dinosaurs and the giant insects and spiders that were also creeping around on movie screens in the 50s, and gave us characters from mythology, Arabian Nights, And then Ray and Charles, for the next two pictures, Three Worlds of Gulliver and Mysterious Island, went back to natural history, and it wasn't until Jason that he really cut loose again in the mythological world. And it was an amazing thing to see. I mean, because again, it's in a day and age when everybody is making Harryhausen films and remaking them or making new ones in the style of as far as the various tableaus, set piece monster encounters. It's hard to believe that that this kind of film was a rarity, but it really was. We kids waited a long time between Harryhausen pictures.
But he took a long time to make them, didn't he? It wasn't like one a year. There was one every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it was a time-consuming process, of course, because unlike the stuff that's done now, all the animation was done by one man, who also was the originator of the project, who designed the characters, designed the scenes, directed the scenes. After storyboarding them, came up with the technological methods for combining the live action and the animation, sculpted the creatures, animated the creatures, composited the creatures the whole thing. And
yeah, it's incredible. One person. I mean, there's always been an assumption that Harryhausen must have had like an assistant, somebody to go make him a sandwich for lunch, but he didn't even have that. He had nobody. There was no one.
There were George Lofgren didn't make sandwiches, but he met him on Mighty Joe Young, and he did. Lofgren worked as a prop maker and sculptor for him, and later he did have people who assisted him in the sculpture of the puppets, but basically everything was done to his design. He wasn't. He
had his father doing armatures. Even Jason's armatures were made by his dad. I mean, one of the things he did when he designed the creatures was to produce a blueprint of the armatures, so that basically the skeleton of the creature, the metal skeleton that allows you to move it frame by frame and it holds its pose. The joints have to be very precise and they can't wobble or become loose. It's a very specialized engineering, and he would send the blueprints to Los Angeles where his dad lived, and his dad would go in the garage and make the armatures. So even that was within the Harryhausen family.
No, that's an amazing story, because his parents were very great supports to him.
And he was an only child.
Yeah, and he was encouraged to follow his dream, and they not only encouraged him, but they helped facilitate it.
I mean, my parents were the same. I mean, I'm an only child, and they always encouraged me. I just think it's so important for parents that they, that the best that any parent can do is to just be 100% supportive. Don't cast any judgment on what your kid wants to do. Just simply get in there and support them and back them. And I've certainly benefited from that, and it seems like Ray had very much the same story.
Oh, he certainly did, and it certainly did pay off, didn't it?
Ray's, we were talking about how he would originate the ideas, and Ray's first little hint of Jason and the Argonauts was on the back of a Mysterious Island script. He says that he's found a script where he's scribbled the first story outline, and it was actually called Sinbad and the Age of Muses, and it was going to be an idea in which Sinbad and Jason were teaming up and going on an adventure together. And even in that very first treatment, which is only one page long, it referenced the Golden Fleece. It had the land of walking skeletons. Is what he
really?
wrote
I haven't
about.
seen this. Oh, my God.
Yeah, the Medusa. He worked the Medusa into it, and he worked the Harpies into it. And that was his first attempts at conjuring up his next film while he was, working on the mysterious island. And then during the next few months, he produced drawings, because one of the things that he did at the very beginning, before there was ever a screenplay or even a story, is that he would imagine the sequences and imagine the creatures, and he'd produce usually about 12 lovely big black and white dramatic drawings, quite large, but they would be illustrating key action moments from the story, and almost always involving a creature or a monster or a giant temple or a building, things that would show people the scale. And then what would happen once these 12 drawings were done is they would actually form the spine of the story meeting with the screenwriters, and they would hire a scriptwriter to come on board, and the scriptwriter would be given the job of essentially working these 12 dramatic moments into a coherent screenplay.
He also used those for selling the project.
And ultimately to sell the project, yeah. I mean, and we do much the same thing now. I mean, one of the things we do normally when we're trying to set a film up is to produce some sort of visual design or story element that we can show the studio, because everybody responds so much better to something that's visual.
I know when I was first when I was first designing monsters, I like to work small, but when I'd present a creature design to a producer, I'd always take it to the print shop and blow it up so it was good and big, so he didn't think he was buying something that was drawn on a napkin, And it's important. Ray liked working big, and Oh, and here they are again, the wonderful gods on this in this thing. Bernard Herrmann's heroic music there is about to give way to something indicating Jason's tininess. It's funny, Herrmann, who was a great asset to any of the pictures he worked on, from Citizen Kane to Psycho to Taxi Driver, and a major creative collaborator in any of those films. It's interesting to listen to his approach to the gods, for instance. He's dealing with Jason being tiny, but the gods, he's evoking not a sense of size with his score. He's evoking their heroic nature, but he leaves the ponderous size music to Talos, who's coming up later. But it's interesting that he doesn't hit the nail on the head necessarily. He goes for something that's less expected, which really enriches, I think, the scene. But this, I mean, Peter, look at that. I imagine when you first saw this moment, you were really excited. Isn't it good? The comp's good. The composition's good.
It's a traveling mat, isn't it? The classic traveling mat. I know when I was growing up, I loved stop motion and I loved visual effects, and it's what I wanted to do when I did finally grow up. I had my sights set on that as a career ever since I can remember. But the traveling mat was always a mysterious thing for me, which, I mean, it doesn't exist anymore because everything's done in computers now, but it's a way of shooting an actor in front of well, in this case, in front of a sodium screen, a yellow sodium screen. Which I think was specialized at Shepperton Studios in London.
And Disney, and I actually saw them shooting stuff at Disney on a yellow screen. It's gorgeous, but the thing that made it gorgeous on film is that they used a beam splitter, and instead of a blue screen, they where you had to go through certain hoops, you had a beam splitter that allowed you to photograph a mat instantaneously that didn't have any image degradation through generational loss, which is what made it superior. But look at this situation. The poor guy, he's there. All the gods are lining up against him, telling him off. We all know that feeling, I'm sure, but from time to time. But it's just a wonderful moment. This film is full of
very good traveling mats. Very good traveling mats. Even the lighting, they often give it away because there wasn't a lot of care in those days, matching lighting, and there's some pretty ropey stuff in some movies. But this is pretty good. This is pretty good quality. Yeah. Well, it's about as good as it got, really, in the 60s as far as matte work was concerned. It didn't get any better than this, really.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Very good.
And Matt, now back then you wouldn't dare put him at in anything but, a fantasy situation. And now they're everywhere, of course. Everything's shot on green. But in this one, they do mostly very successfully use sodium, even for a few shots, that's the stunt director, by the way. A few shots where they have just somebody matted in, like Hercules' introduction coming up. Hercules is matted into a real shot. Andrew Fauld's there, who became a member of Parliament, House of Commons. Interestingly enough, this is a very interesting cast, but to my mind, nobody's better.
Nigel Green. Nigel Green was
Nigel Green, eh?
Yep, as Hercules. He was terrific. He was in Zulu, played the regimental sergeant major in Zulu. Terrific, which was actually shot pretty much around this time.
Yeah, and a very sensitive actor. He's not, he's not the muscle man, but he's also not the muscle head that Hercules is generally played as. He's played as a very charismatic, charming, heroic, world-weary human being, And there's Jack Kearney.
Now, he used to live in New Zealand, and when I was making movies, 10 years ago...
John Kearney, sorry.
John Kearney, John Kearney. His name often came up as somebody that we might want to consider for... I mean, we never had a role that was suitable for him, because... but I know that he sort of became a New Zealand resident for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, I understand he's back in Scotland, and long about the time.
He writes too.
Yeah, and he's written an autobiography about his days as an actor called Grease Paint Monkey, and I don't know anybody who's interested in the arts who wouldn't want a book called Grease Paint Monkey on his shelf. I think it's a wonderful title. And I imagine it's got some, or I don't imagine, I've been told that it has some very interesting stories about the making of this picture, among other things.
So we're going to have a look at a little bit of stop motion here, aren't we, with the discus throw? Yes.
The first animation in the picture, first stop motion in the picture. I don't know the actual size of that rock. I do know that this is a classic Ray Harryhausen process split screen.
The discus was about 1 inch in diameter, the one that he animated. There it is. And he had members of the crew throw stones, skipping stones across the water to generate those splashes. And then he animated the discus to...
match the splashes. Yeah.
To match the splashes. So the splashes came first, and he just simply followed...
He followed with the discus, and then he had the miniature discus hit the rock that was back projected on a translucent screen behind it, but it was a live-action rock, if a rock can be called live-action. And then as it passed over it, it went behind it, which is a matting trick that Ray used to good effect in a number of pictures.
So once their drawings were finished, and they, I know that Schneer and Harryhausen started to talk to Columbia about the idea of doing this film towards the end of 1960. And Ray went location scouting, and naturally, because it's a Greek mythology, Greece was the country that he scouted first, but he was pretty disillusioned with Greece, which he described as being bleak and grey. And at that time, they hadn't restored very many of their ruins. In fact, they were so unrestored that a lot of it was overgrown and not particularly photogenic. So he very quickly decided that Greece wasn't going to work. And for a long time, Yugoslavia was targeted as being where the production. And they got to being 1 month away from starting the shooting when Charles Schneer became sick of the what seems like some pretty underhand financial stuff that was happening in Yugoslavia. I think there were people expecting a lot of under the table payments, and there was blackmail going on, and various he realized that the corruption in Yugoslavia wasn't going to be a very happy place for his film to be spending its time. So they bailed out of Yugoslavia at the very last minute, about a month before they started shooting, and very quickly scouted Italy. I know the director, Don Chaffee, went to the north of Italy, and Harryhausen and Charles went to the south because they had so little time that they split the country between them to try to find their locations. And they found them in the south. Ray was very much, in love with the area around Palermo, which is south of Naples. And most of this film apparently is shot within an hour or so's drive of Palermo. The Argo, the ship that we're looking at here, was built over a fishing barge powered by 3 large Mercedes-Benz engines. And it cost $250,000, which at the time was a huge amount of money, large proportion of the budget. I mean, it's almost a tenth of the budget spent on this huge prop. But very important, and I think they did okay, because when they finished the movie, they sold the ship to 20th Century Fox, and it was used in the big sea battle in Cleopatra.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they got their money back on the ship just fine.
Yeah, and this is and one of the things about this is they actually took, as opposed to Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, they actually took this boat out on the open sea.
Yep.
Sinbad was shot in the harbor, and so they had to be clever with their backgrounds. But
yes.
This film, aside from the odd traveling matte shot like this one, where they're becalmed, you get to see the horizon rising up and down in a very very natural,
It gives
very
it
natural
great,
way.
gives it great production value. There's no doubt these shots of the ship at sea are definitely worth every penny.
Well, this is something else, Peter, isn't it, that Charles and Ray were masters at, and that is they didn't have a lot of money, but they had a lot of taste, and they actually would go out and find locations that were worth looking at,
Yeah.
Dramatic and unusual and often never before seen. And in this case, with a director who had a damn good eye, they were able to make a film that really, stands up as a real picture.
Yeah, I know. It was really one of the things that I fell in love with when I was growing up, as an idea of being a filmmaker, making these types of films, and it's what I wanted to do. And it was going around and visiting an amazing location, and then deciding that you're going to shoot a monster sequence at this location. That to me was just what a great way to spend your life.
Yeah, I know.
Just say, God, the monster could come out of this cave. It could climb over that wall. The combination of these exotic, wonderful locations with the creatures. To me, that was part of what I fell in love with for sure. Is the idea of making those types of films. And indeed, in Super 8, when I was shooting movies in Super 8. As a teenager, they were, this type of thing. I lived in a very dramatic coastal area of New Zealand, and we had a beach with large rock formations, and I, filmed Super 8 films on the beach with creatures coming around the rocks, and, very much the same sort of thing. It was, I know this figurehead, who comes to life here, the original idea, I think she was built with a moving mouth, like a ventriloquist dummy, and the idea meaning that Ray very tastefully decided that the mouth was going to stay still, and it was become a psychic communication. But I know the prop was actually built to talk like a ventriloquist doll.
Well, that was a good choice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
The Maggie Smith part in Clash of the Titans was the next step in evolution from that, where they actually had a projection of her face and she did talk. But it was I don't know, something about that statue communicating telepathically is pretty cool. If only it looked a little bit more like Honor Blackman, But
just looking at Todd Armstrong here, it's worth mentioning that when they finished the picture, he had an American accent, being an American actor, and they felt that it stood out amongst all the British classical kind of actors surrounding him. So he was actually dubbed by a British actor. His voice was replaced by somebody else's voice, which is what we're hearing.
Yeah, and the same later with Medea, oddly enough. Although both of them had, decent voices, you know.
Yeah. I think it was only an accent. It wasn't a performance thing, because sometimes you change somebody's, you change somebody's voice because they're doing a bad performance. But in this case, it was really that his American accent it just drew attention to itself, being the only one in the film,
ship.
really.
Yeah.
So
American
we're not
in
hearing Todd Armstrong. We're hearing an unknown British performer who probably will remain nameless for all time, I guess.
I've checked it in IMDb, but I won't quote it because I never trust them. But look at that. I mean, look at the detail. Good. The detail you can see in this image is so wonderful. I mean, the rough-hewn is that branches, or I guess it's steps. Yeah, that's it, for steps up the mast. You know, and just the art direction on this is quite fine. You know, the stuff that they didn't just find, but they just built, like the art direction of the sail itself, you know, the good looking golden fleece painted on that thing.
Now, this is a typical Harryhausen location. He loved his rock formations on the coastline, and you always knew when there was dramatic rocks on a dramatic coast, that there was going to be a monster showing up sometime soon. Yeah, I think in some of the Italian muscle man pictures, goats were about all you got, but Ray really delivered the goods, and his sense of size, you know, again, the sense of vastness that Ray brought to it, along with ably assisted by Bernard Herrmann, of course, here, is amazing. I remember seeing that for the first time and just being blown away. Now, Peter, I know we're both hobbyists and collect little bits of memorabilia. I guess that's not a dirty secret to give away. And you've got the odd Talos lying around, haven't you? I know I've got replica ones.
Replica ones, yeah. I'm talking about the replicas.
Well, they're good garage kits. They're called. There's a really great industry, which is, I think it's largely illegal. But it is nonetheless, for fans, it is great, which is people making copies of Ray's creatures, and they make sort of limited edition resin copies that you can buy through certain magazines and internet sites that should remain nameless, and and I think half the time they're not licensed, and they shouldn't really be doing it, but nonetheless it's their heart's in the right place, and I'm sure nobody's getting rich off it, but it does allow the collector to actually to build up I've probably got 100, maybe even more, probably near 150 Harryhausen related resin figures, all between, like, say, 12 inches, 14 inches high, and covering just about every creature that he ever put into a movie. And Talos, I've probably got 7 or 8 different Taloses. Somebody finally came out with one that was the image that we've just seen. I mean, most Taloses are standing, upright with a sword in their hand, looking big and tall and walking. But finally, a company released one that was the kneeling on the plinth, which was cool. That's cool, being the first image.
Yeah, I remember not too many years ago in Wellington, in fact, they ran Ben-Hur, and I was watching the chariot scene. And there are 2 great bronze statues in that.
At either end of the course.
Yeah, and I can't help but think that Ray watched that and thought, wouldn't those look interesting if they stood up and chased somebody? And I never asked him if he derived inspiration.
He credits the Colossus of Rhodes as his inspiration, doesn't
yes,
he?
but this and rightly so.
But I know what you mean, though. They do remind you, that image of him kneeling there reminds you of those Ben-Hur guys.
I can't help but think he was in the audience, and that planted a seed,
Well, it was literally only a year or 2 before this.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been just before he started this, for sure.
Yeah.
The Talos in myth, of course, is smaller, bronze, but smaller. And as you say,
he was
Peter,
between...
he was,
the Talos of myth is 8 or 9 feet tall, isn't he? Much smaller.
And Colossus of Rhodes is what Ray was thinking of. But this is one of those moments that's staged with great, it speaks not only to Ray as the effects man, but Ray as the director and dramatist and showman, because it's a wonderful moment.
Yeah, here it is. Fantastic. He credits the inspiration to a Japanese movie, which he's forgotten the name of it.
Yeah,
but
where somebody
he
turned
saw
and
a
gave a
Japanese
look,
where a head kind of rotates around, and he found it very creepy and effective. And he says that he saw that movie just as he was about to start animating Talos.
Oh, that may allow us to narrow it down some.
Yeah.
Or somebody.
I love the way that Talos gets off here. I love the way that he almost loses balance and he has to wobble against the back of the plinth. Like, there,
yeah.
It's just, that's personality. That's an
Absolutely.
animator putting performance into their creature. It's terrific. I love these shots which allow this enormous headroom. You know that a creature's about to walk into that frame. It's a terrible tease, but it's very exciting.
You don't know where he's coming from. I mean, he could be walking into that, because you're expecting to see him.
But there he is. It's allowed all that room for his head. It's fantastic.
No, it's a real thrill. It's a real thrill. And just the modeling on this, the vacant eyes,
changing the hands,
the bronze look, the pantomime.
Yep. Just the walking. It's like this is a statue that's not used to walking. He doesn't walk very easily. It's really great.
And anybody who's ever done any stop motion knows that it's a lot easier to take big moves than little tiny ones, because little tiny moves make you think you're not getting anywhere. But if you're going to be making something move at a slow rate of speed, the moves have to be very slow.
He is moving slowly. There'd be only incremental shifts of those limbs, wouldn't there?
Imperceptible,
frames.
Really.
Yeah.
Now, I understand, and you'll have to get Ray to confirm this when you listen to the Harryhausen track, but I believe one of those sailors, maybe the guy that ran into the water, was none other than Charles H. Schneer, according to sources close to the production. And hopefully Ray will elucidate on his track.
That's pretty interesting. So we're seeing a lot of different techniques here. I mean, dynamation, as it was christened by Ray, it's basically you just have to, when you're looking at these shots, you have to imagine that the rubber statue of Talos is about 14 inches tall. Look, we're waiting for him to appear. There's all that sky.
Yeah.
There he is. He's going to appear. Now, he's about 14 inches tall, and he's basically on a table, and behind the puppet is being projected the image of the ship at sea with the rocks. So when you're looking at these shots, you just have to imagine that the puppet's standing in front of a screen. So everything that we're seeing is actually behind the puppet. But where the tricky technique comes in is that they split the screen with a wobbly line that follows a hill or follows a piece of geography, and they basically put the puppet behind that section of split screen. And which comes forward and just sits in front of the puppet. So it effectively sandwiches the puppet between a foreground and background piece of the original plate.
Into a live action plate. And unlike the traveling mat, because it is all photographed at once, even though the background is second generation, you have the light bending around it, so you don't have a big line around your subject of interest. The image degradation is sort of across the board or across the screen. This, interestingly enough, that isn't a true closed harbor. He's just standing on a rock over to the left, and that's a miniature piece of land continuing. And when you look at the beginning of the film again, as I'm sure you'll watch it again, the first shot is of that formation with the head of the guard and the spear sort of sticking up against the rock on the left, without Ray's additional rock. But look at the detail on this guy.
So we're seeing different cuts. We're seeing a miniature boat that was used for some of those shots. I think they had a 4-foot long model,
and the tiny one that's in his hand, which couldn't have been more than 3 inches long.
No,
maximum.
and when we saw the oar and the mast fall into the water, that was being animated on wires, a wire rig, where frame by frame, little pieces of debris were being dropped.
As were the little people.
Down.
There are a couple little men falling, which are very evident in the Blu-ray. And it's like it's like trained fleas. They're just extremely small.
The principal thing with this technique of Ray Harryhausen's is that he has to photograph a screen where he's projecting a piece of film that he had already photographed on location. And now he's in his special effects studio with a camera pointed at this little screen, and there's an image being projected. The size of the projected image would be totally dependent on how big the puppet had to appear in this scene. So if the puppet is only occupying a quarter of the frame, then he's projecting an image that might be 6 foot wide, which is much harder because the light's getting less and he's having to somehow make it bright and vibrant.
Longer exposures usually, yeah.
Longer exposures. And then if it's a close-up of the puppet, like a head and shoulders with the screen behind, then the screen might only be 6 inches wide. So the puppet would always stay the same size, obviously. Occasionally he had 2 puppets to represent different scales, but normally it was only 1 puppet. And the size of so that's always the constant, and the size of the projected screen is what would vary. And then the other variation and the other piece of real artistry comes into deciding where to split the screen and what piece of that plate you're going to bring forward and put in front of the puppet. And that's very ingenious because often it incorporates a piece of miniature landscape, because whenever you see a shadow of the creature or the monster, then that shadow has to be on a piece of miniature land, because there is no shadow that was photographed on location. So if the creature's casting a shadow, it's usually because it's casting it on a miniature piece of landscape.
The only exception to that rule is when he would use a translucent shadow maker that he would put on a C-stand behind the screen. And it would sort of drop into the split line,
All right, okay.
And that he used that a lot in Seventh Voyage.
Now he's shooting some big close-ups of this puppet, which is actually interesting. It's holding up well. The puppet of Talos is about 15 inches tall, so these close-ups, we're getting in very close to quite a small puppet. And it's holding up very, very well. It's the classic emotionless state of this face, isn't it? That's what's so creepy about it. Is there's no emotion. It's that implacable sort of stare of the statue is as creepy as all hell. I always
loved it. And a lot of these statues had eyes made of. The statues that he's emulating had eyes made of ivory or some damn thing, that were more literal, and they've come down to us with the eyes gone because they've either been grave robbed or just plain fallen out of the bronze, But imagine how silly it would look with giant mother of pearl eyes staring at us. But what he's got there is just perfect. I mean, it's a great look.
Would this have been a larger foot section?
Yes, yeah.
Yep, he did make a larger foot for that. Yep.
And ditto the hand that reached for the sailors earlier. We saw that when I and Jim Danforth and Ray's daughter and son-in-law went through his
we'll talk about that
Los
in a minute.
Angeles garage.
It's a great story. We'll tell you all about that in a moment. I just wanted to look at the great use of cellophane.
Yeah.
You see, there's this shot here. That's just cellophane that he's animating frame by frame to represent that liquid flowing out of the foot.
And it's on a wheel. It's a wheel that's rotating. Its axis. It's at the edge of a wheel, and its axis is off screen.
Right.
It's behind Talos's foot. Amazingly clever and simple.
Yeah. And this is a great piece of Harryhausen pathos too, because he always tried to do something special for the death of his creatures. He always tried to give their demise some little piece of pathos. There's a whole, every time you look at, one of his creatures, getting killed at the end of the sequence, there's something nice that he's adding in, and the clutching of the throat and the writhing round. It makes you feel sorry for him.
Yeah,
great.
and he knows when and how to draw it out. And this poor Hylas,
Yeah.
you see it coming a mile away, and
Yeah.
that's why it's good, because
Yeah.
they want to telegraph it. Oh, come on, get
Yeah.
out of there.
This is a fiberglass version of Talos that Ray made to represent this
And
hollow statue.
animated onto real sand too, so it could smush around. The head and the arm could, push the sand around like like King Kong going unconscious at the end of, the Skull Island episode in the 1933 version, as we call it.
So let's go back to Ray's garage, because it's a great story. I came into it late because you told me, Randy, that Ray had, he lived in London for most of the latter half of his career and life, but he did maintain a house in Los Angeles that he'd go to from time to time, and he owned a garage or two in LA, and the garage in LA had been locked and padlocked shut for decades, for decades, and it was jam-packed with stuff. And Ray's daughter wanted to clean it out, and she started to. Well, you should tell the story, because I'm not sure how you got involved in it.
Well, through Ray's writing partner and archivist Tony Dalton. He said Vanessa'd like to clean the thing out, and I said happy to help, and. So we met in August of 2008 in the Pacific Palisades. That's as much information as I'm going to divulge, and where I'd actually met Ray for the first time in 1971 as a cheeky college student. But Jim Danforth and I and Vanessa and Kenny and Tim Nicholson went down there and went through the garage. Ray said there was nothing really there of any consequence.
No, Ray sort of basically said just clean it all out and throw it away. There's nothing there. It's all just going to go. It's all just junk to be thrown out. That was his feeling, wasn't it?
Yeah,
but
and we found.
Fortunately, there was some interesting geeky eyes got to look at the stuff before it got thrown out.
Yeah, that we found. The first thing that was found. Vanessa and company went down there on a reconnaissance mission before Jim and I joined them, and they found all Ray's puppets, his marionettes from his teens that he made as a teenager. And then after that, I opened a box, and there inside the box was a shopping bag that hadn't been opened since the 1970s, And inside, the first thing I pulled out was a little wooden curlicue, and it was the dragon horn from the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And then the next one was its mate. And literally, I'm not compressing this for dramatic effect. Then I looked down, and right under the dragon horns was a little model of Sinbad. Little curly toes, and it was one. Jim Danforth identified it as the model that was carried aloft by the Rock, not the one that was picked up by the Cyclops, which was bigger.
Right, yep.
And underneath that was a little tiny piece of rubber, which I just looked like raw rubber until I flipped it over and saw that it was the head of the blue harpy.
Which we're about to see pretty shortly. Yeah.
And armatures and the Jason puppet that you'll see later, and Talos's large hand, and flying saucers from Earth versus the Flying Saucers.
This is every Harryhausen fan's fantasy. You realize this, don't you?
Yeah.
That of opening up the garage that's been locked for 30 years and finding this stuff. It's fantastic.
Oh, I know. My voice raised at least 3 octaves while we were filming it, and Vanessa had to tell me to knock it off. But I kept saying, "But it's Sinbad," So
this was being filmed now. It was being shot.
I had my video camera with me for a little bit of it, but I finally dropped it because I couldn't. I just couldn't keep my mitts off this stuff.
But it's great that there's some film existing. It's historic.
Yeah.
It's a historic
and as soon as we can find the technology to slow my voice down, we'll let you see it. But anyway, it was a huge treasure trove. this is a moment where we meet a couple of Harryhausen creatures that give us more of a fair fight, because they're human-sized. And they do one of the many tricks, one of the many arrows in Ray's quiver, is demonstrated here, because one thing that Ray was a fiend for was getting the live action, as Disney oddly called it, the human action and the puppet action to actually coordinate and make contact. That was
interact, yeah.
And that was taught to him by O'Brien, and that was something O'Brien was always adamant about, and Ray as well. And so you'll see moments where staffs are grabbed and belts are pulled and tables are upended, and
I think even Patrick Troughton's clothing occasionally is on wires getting tugged, isn't it? Sometimes.
Yeah, he pulls either his belt or his sash or some bloody thing, and just unrolls him like a.
So just when you're watching it, just imagine these two puppets being suspended in wires in front of a small movie screen, and the image of the blind guy swinging his stick around is being projected frame by frame, and Ray's animating the puppets in front of the screen, and he's looking through the camera, because it's only through the camera lens that you're getting the lineup that you need, and seeing when those claws are looking like they are at the same place as a piece of clothing or a stick that there's having to interact with. It's all to do with the lineup between there. Look at that.
Look at that.
So that's a wire. So there's a wire pulling the belt away. And he's putting the claws in and making the claws look as if they're pulling the belt. But actually, there's a gap of probably about 15 or 16 inches between the puppet and the screen.
Well, at least because of
the
light contamination onto the screen, he probably has a little further away than that.
But, because you've got to have lights on the puppet, but you can't put any light on the scree because it's going to wash out the image.
Exactly.
No, it's a very difficult.
No,
exercise.
and nowadays doing it in the computer, putting them up in the air is for free, because in virtual you can hang them virtually in virtual space and they're fine. Likewise, blur on the puppets is something that is the push of a button. But having done a little bit of that sort of wire work, animating flying characters or characters making leaps, you've got to put 4 wires into the puppet, thread them with a needle through the puppet's skin, attach them with spindles to a device that allows you to lower and raise them, tilt and twist them, and move them across your stage out of camera range, which means every frame you've got to get out a ladder, put the ladder down, climb up the ladder, push the wire holder along in some cases, something as simple as a 2x4 suspended between 2 C-stands, which is marked with your increments of movement. And so you move it laterally, then you lower or raise it. You twist the spindles to give it a different cant or bank. Climb down the ladder and get the ladder out of the shot. Take a frame of film. Now,
I'm just going to jump in here, because what's interesting, I've just realized, is that this is in daytime. There's two scenes with the harpies. We've seen the first one, and they're about to make an appearance at nighttime. But in the DVD edition of this film, they graded this whole sequence to appear to be night. It's interesting.
The early part. The early part?
Was graded as a nighttime sequence. But I always remembered it from when I saw the movie when I was a kid on TV as being in the daytime, which is nice to see. The Blu-ray has been retimed to bring it back to daylight again for this first, and then it's nighttime as it should be for the second sequence.
Well,
that's Patrick Troughton, who was Patrick Troughton. Reappeared in Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, playing the character Melanthius, much older man, obviously. And he was one of the original Doctor Who actors. He was actually the second Doctor Who. When I was a kid watching Doctor Who, I started watching sort of his seasons, the Patrick Troughton years, and then he was replaced by John Pertwee.
I, of course, first saw him in Olivier's Richard III, but
Of course you did, yes.
no, I
Yes.
first saw him in this, and he's marvelous in it, isn't he?
And this is filmed on location. This temple complex we're looking at is an authentic ruined temple that's it's called the Paestum Temples in southern Italy, and it's also the location that Ray used for Clash of the Titans for Medusa's lair as well. A slightly different part of the temples. There's 3 temples apparently, and the Medusa's temple was one of the 3. Now, this is an interesting sequence we're going to look at here, because when you see the net being dropped on the harpies, you're seeing the animated puppets having to now be animated underneath a net, which is like a miniature net, I guess largely made of wire, I would imagine.
That's
or certainly with a lot of
animatable,
wire
you know?
elements, yeah. That he has to animate frame by frame, but still keeping it looking like a loose kind of fluid net.
And that's where the thin line between dedication and masochism is breached, because it's any of the things he's doing are difficult enough, but animating under a net, you know.
See, one of the things that's interesting is, I know, having seen photographs of the puppet, that these puppets are not hugely detailed, and I'm seeing that Ray's not getting close to the puppets at all in his shots. There's no close-ups of their faces or anything, because their heads are tiny in real life, aren't they? Like their heads are only about half an inch in diameter.
I'd say, I'd say, you know,
well,
I don't know how big. I haven't shaken hands with you in a while, but so I can't say about your thumbs. But it's about 3/4 of the length of my last thumb joint, and I'm
right, yeah,
you know, not big.
So they're a little bit too small to allow him to shoot close up. So I'm getting that feeling when I'm looking at it.
And and the sculpture is very bold and very basic, you know.
Yeah. But it was a favourite image of Ray's, wasn't it? The flying harpy. I mean, it reappeared a couple of times in slightly different guises in latter Harryhausen movies.
And he tried to get it into a picture called The Elementals, which didn't, or something like it.
Yep.
And then he tried to put it in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, because the harpies are quite like the harpies illustrated by Ray's hero, or one of his heroes, Gustave Doré, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
And so they're old friends that he never got to give a job to until this picture. And then later, of course, Homunculus in Golden Voyage was very similar in its bat-winged look. But yeah, these are just strange creatures, and again, you know, very out of the ordinary for the day.
He when he made the harpies, it was a case of he didn't get his father to engineer all the armature parts. He actually stripped down the prehistoric bird from Mysterious Island and reused a lot of the armature of the bird found its way into the harpies. Yeah, I mean, he would have still had to have made some components.
Oh, must have done, because the bird was rather bigger.
Yeah.
And I think it may have been the other way around. I think the harpy armatures became pterodactyls in
well, I would have thought so too. That would have been the continuation of them, but Mysterious Island was obviously just before this. Just before this film. I mean, that's one of the things. Now we're seeing, this is about as close as we get to these little guys. I mean, that's one of the things with Ray's puppets, because obviously today, you know, we're all the Harryhausen fans. We're all interested in the original puppets and hoping that they'll survive and be looked after, which they certainly are, under the Harryhausen Foundation, which Ray is obviously the prime member. They are spending money restoring and preserving all the original puppets, but it's frustrating, because occasionally, you know, the budget constraints of Ray's films would mean that a puppet would actually get stripped apart at the end of a film, and the armature, which was the most expensive and time-consuming part of the puppet, that would get recycled and reused into another puppet. Not all the time. That didn't happen all the time, but it happened occasionally.
Too often for us, you know, who would love to see all of them. I know the Cyclops he reused
Cyclops
part
is
of,
the biggest.
and he
That's
threw
the biggest
away
loss.
the mold. You know,
Yeah,
the mold is gone, and nothing remains of the Cyclops except the armature. But
Yeah.
I helped him and Tony. Adam Valdez and I, in fact, were in the attic in Ray's London house looking through his molds, and wonderful stuff back to Golden Voyage and Guanji, but but nothing from Seventh Voyage. I was hoping that he was wrong about the
So he's got
Cyclops,
no.
but it's
There's no
gone.
molds. There's no molds before Guanji.
I won't say that with assurance, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't remember seeing any. Now, I didn't go through all the molds, but, the first thing I saw was pulled out the ship's siren, the ship's figurehead from Golden Voyage, yeah.
Golden Voyage. Yep. Yeah.
Which is a favorite puppet, and there it is. And the Medusa, he's got the Medusa. He's got virtually everything from
his later
I believe
films.
Guanji on, yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah. Good.
Oh,
Well,
he's
at
got
least
the
that's a blessing.
Allosaurus mold too, Pete. He's got
Oh,
that.
that's one of my favorite.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
isn't it?
one of my
Oh, it's
favorite
great.
creatures.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful piece of design.
It sure is.
Allosaur from 1 million years BC that attacks the village. It's a terrific dinosaur. That's one of my favorite movie dinosaurs. It's
Yeah.
got such an evil look on its face.
I'll second that. Yeah, it for sure is. And
So we're now going to see quite an elaborate visual effects sequence, which is unusual to some degree within Harryhausen's films because it's a sequence that doesn't feature stop motion animation. It's sort of more of what his competitors were doing at the time, which is using a real actor and slow motion photography, which Ray did here because you can understand why, because it is basically it's a human being that we're going to look at rising out of the water in a moment.
and moved amid falling
So there's no
debris.
reason for
Yeah.
it to be stop motion at all, really. But it's just unusual because Ray, it is sort of him dabbling in the type of techniques that most of his competitors used to do.
That's a very good point. It's a very good point.
This is one of those scenes that today, you've got to look at with a decent suspension of disbelief because, it doesn't stand the test of time with the miniature boats and the water splashes obviously give away the fact that you're looking at a miniature with those large droplets of water and things. But,
you can't
you
change.
just...
You can't change
Who
the
cares?
surface tension, unfortunately.
No, water's
Without-
always been a problem, doing miniature work around water. Always a problem. But it still has, you just look at it with a point of view of not worrying about that, and it's terrifically exciting.
Well,
I mean, look at it. Great. Look at that ship going down. Well,
there's some very nice bits of lighting, like this shot, where they're bold shadows and nice cross lighting.
it's interesting looking at this stuff because it's definitely times are changing. Because when I was a kid watching Jason and the Argonauts on TV, I mean, I knew that this was a miniature. It was obvious. But to me, it was exciting. It was a window into a world that I wanted to be part of. And I would think it's a miniature, but within moments I wouldn't care, and I would just look past that and enjoy the sequence. But and that would have been when I was, say 12 or 13 years old. You show this to a 12 or 13-year-old today, and they just say, "Oh, it's fake," and they have no interest. It's weird because I come from a generation that was excited and inspired by looking at this stuff, and that's not the case anymore today.
Well, the thing
It's
that's
a bit of a-
interesting,
it's a bit sad.
and it may hold true, but for the film today. But I've watched this film many, many times over the years since its release in '63, but not until I saw it in the Blu-ray on a very big screen, on a 9-foot screen, did I really feel like I was watching a movie again. And now I'm admittedly not 9 any longer, but I had been sort of jaded by looking at it on television all these years, but it's really got a new exciting life. And I know what you mean about the about the suspension of disbelief. I wonder if a kid watching it all the way through would be more forgiving than a kid seeing it excerpted, because I totally agree that it wouldn't be what they're used to seeing now. But would they get into the story? And that's what we'll have to see when people start showing this to their kids.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of standards because, for 1963, this was as good as visual effects.
Well, that's very true.
Was, and now it's not, and
Yeah.
I guess it's there's a lack of respect, if you can put it that way, that people have because, it doesn't represent the state of the art anymore in a way as it used to.
And at the same time, it doesn't represent the fashion. And so those are two entirely different things that work hand in hand, I think.
But what is interesting with Ray's films, and it's the same of King Kong, the original 33 King Kong, is that I think they're responsible for inspiring more people to have a career in the film industry, either directors or writers or visual effects artists, any number of different roles. They have actually inspired kids to do this, to make this their life. And I don't think anybody else's movies have been responsible for exciting, budding young filmmakers than Ray Harryhausen's. For some reason, his films have a quality which makes you want to become an animator and a filmmaker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do I ever?
Yeah.
And,
well, you're one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, he was so he was unique. And obviously he was the controlling artistic force behind these pictures in a way.
And I think that's a key to it too, because I think that, as a kid, trying to read every morsel of information about Ray Harryhausen, of which there was virtually nothing, you were still aware that it was him by himself doing a lot of this stuff, and it gave you hope. It gave you hope that I'm just me. I don't have a whole film crew. I don't have the ability, but I can animate. I can build a monster in the evenings after school, and at the weekends I can sit in front of my creature with a camera for 12 straight hours and animate a shot. And it was something that was actually doable for a teenager. And so that made a difference too, which, it's not quite like that anymore today. You don't quite get that feeling that you can do it all yourself anymore.
No, for sure. And even though the computer has freed people up and turned the preponderance of HD video cameras has allowed people to have, studios on, sitting on the shelf for comparative pittance. Nevertheless, it's such a, the industry is such a, assembly line, I guess is the phrase I'm looking for. That people don't necessarily get inspired by the one guy that does everything. No, the author, as readily, because he's not around.
That author, yeah.
Look at that shot, Pete. Isn't that nice? Even though the lighting's a little.
So this would be sodium traveling match, wouldn't it? Yeah.
There's a big. I have to ask Ray about this. There's a big line around the reflecting pool mats, and I wonder if those are blue screens as opposed. Although she's pretty tight there. Never mind. Never mind. But aren't they? I mean, they're just a cool old couple. I mean, the writing of this picture is nothing to be ignored. It's a pretty intelligent picture for a film of this type, I would say.
I mean, as a teenager, I tended to just be waiting for the next creature sequence.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's kind of it was a strange thing. I was so excited about the movies, but I never really credited them as great movies in their entirety, I have to admit.
Well,
I
yeah,
just
and
would,
there's-
the
with some-
sequences
yeah.
are what's great about them. the
Yeah. Oh,
big
for sure, and with
sequences.
some justification. I just think there's a genuine affection between Zeus and Hera, which is is charismatic and charming. You know?
And we're still looking at great production value here. Look at this. They're at sea. Well, they're not here. She's Compton, but this is on location.
Yeah, we're
they're
for some
there on
for
a
some
boat.
reason all the angles on Medea were done in the studio, which
Yeah, presumably the actress might not have been available. Maybe when they were doing the location work.
as happens. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it was
so
Ray.
she could be doubled there for sure.
Ray actually says that they had very, very bad weather. They had 6 weeks of constant rain while they were trying to shoot the location work for this film. Apparently, it was very, very frustrating. He said that they spent so long waiting for the rain to stop that they started to run out of food, and they ended up with cornflakes and spaghetti were the only two things that they had left at the end. So there was a lot of invention for how do you actually eat varieties of cornflakes and spaghetti in sort of interesting combinations.
Well, it's an Italian-American co-production, so why not? You know?
Yeah.
Goodness.
But everything looks bright and sunny. But I was surprised when he said how frustrating it was. They had very, very bad weather.
Are you a priestess?
I'll tell you one thing, and we were talking about something more interesting than the weather when this scene came up, but the scene with Hermes on the mountain before they go up to Olympus. Very stormy sky there, but gorgeous. I mean, just really nice cinematography. Wilkie Cooper was a real find for Ray. You know,
Yeah.
because these films all have a very good look, but they certainly took advantage of a cloudscape that would have done any matte painter proud in that particular moment.
Right, yeah. I mean, Wilkie Cooper, the DP we're talking about, he did a lot of Ray's films, didn't he? He did most of the 1960s Harryhausen films, I think.
Yep, from Sinbad on, I think.
Yeah, he did Seventh Voyage of Sinbad on to, I think, 1 million years BC.
Just tell us where the city is.
And there's 3 or 4 in between, yeah.
Now there's an interesting moment coming up here that's interesting in Bernard Herrmann's career, because he had such a wonderful, I'm pronouncing him Herrmann as though I'm German. I always say Bernard Herrmann, but put a microphone in front of me and I get pretentious. The Bernard Herrmann's career was an interesting one in that he had a long career of radio work, where he was very, very creative, and the work all went out into the ether. You know, it was played once on some dramatic radio show and then gone. And so he would, in some cases, reuse music. And this film has many major cues that either had their origins in radio or in other films. The scene you're about to see with Jason and Acastus fighting it has music that was derived from the Kentuckian, where Burt Lancaster and Walter Matthau are having a whip fight. And the harpy music actually is a reuse of his cue reorchestrated from the movie Five Fingers with James Mason as a Nazi spy. And there are other things. The most audacious, I think, is the Hydra music, which is for about 30 seconds anyway, note for note, the music for the undersea cephalopod creature in the film they did just before this, Mysterious Island. It's the exact same music. You know?
Is it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, no, there are a couple of more too. The skeleton is not original. It's Nocturne and Scherzo, something he wrote, I think, for radio or a concert piece, like in the mid-30s.
Right.
You know, yeah. So there's a lot of this stuff, but it's not like he was just yawning his way through a job of work. It all works as a cohesive whole, and it's all appropriate.
Sure it does, yeah. Yeah.
But it's just interesting that I think he knew he'd done this stuff that was going to disappear forever, unless he found some way of referring to it,
Yeah, so what he was really doing was to be using pieces of music he was proud of in a way that they'd actually survive and become part of a permanent work, which is fair enough.
No, I'd say.
Fair enough. So we should just to go back to the story of the garage. So you spent, how long did you spend cleaning?
Couple of days.
Couple of days. And you unearthed some rolls of film as well, and that's where I started to get involved.
Yeah, no, they were the dailies of all his black and white films, from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms to 20 Million Miles to Earth, and you very generously offered to, preserve this stuff, to restore it, transfer it to, high def, and actually, I guess you guys are in the process of, converting it to 4K, and...
Yeah, well, that's one of the advantages with owning a post-production, facility, and we've got some great people down here, so... as soon as you emailed me or something, I got to hear about what was going on, and we flew you down to New Zealand with the rolls of film, because we didn't really know what was on these rolls, did we?
No, we had an idea.
We had a clue.
We had a clue, because I unspooled them a bit, but it looked like, all the fairy tales, and much of his early stuff, plus some of his most early animation.
And some of his very early animation tests, some stuff with his dad in them. I mean, it was really interesting, and so... You came down and we spent a few days going through it and transferring it to high def. And as you say, we're doing it at 4K, which is, a supremely sharp, detailed archive format, so that these will be preserved, because they were deteriorating rolls of 35mm film that was starting to, some of them were getting very, very smelly and very decomposed. But I think we got there in time, and the majority of it is transferred really well. And I know the stuff that I saw, which, as you say, it was the stop motion dailies. So in other words, when
Ray...
Right
off the camera negative.
Right off the camera. So Ray's filming the stop motion. At the end of the day, he takes the roll of negative out of the camera, sends it to the lab. They develop the negative and they make him a print to look at, because he obviously had to have a print to screen it at home to make sure that he was happy with the shot, which is like an animation shot. So it might be a day's worth of work, could be a 7 or 8 second shot. And he looks at this presumably just once. He probably runs it on a moviola, maybe not even a projector. And he looks at it once and then puts it back in the can. And it was all these cans that we found. And so what we've actually got, or what Ray's got, because it belongs to him, is absolutely pristine animation from his black and white films. Almost all the animation, just about everything.
And and some things that haven't been seen.
Some
very
things
few,
because some alternative takes, a few alternative takes.
But the amazing thing is, with all the slates, 95% at least were take one, and 95% of what we saw was what was in the movie.
Yeah,
which is
and occasionally there's a little bit of a head
record.
or handle that's not. He sometimes comes in a bit later and gets out earlier. So you've got the full shot is what we've got, though. So we've got the whole thing, every single frame that he photographed. But what blows you away is the quality. I mean, you've never ever seen this stuff. The skin of the puppets, the texture, of the emir and the octopus. It came from beneath the sea. It just was gorgeous. It was so detailed.
And also some of those became processed plates to play behind the live actors. So we just saw the processed plates with no actors. So we saw them fresh. I mean, you and I can put ourselves in a Harryhausen movie. We can crash our car into the Emer.
So this is really exciting. The fact that this exists now and we're restoring it, and we're obviously giving it to the foundation once it's done. And I think that Ray and Tony are hoping to actually produce a documentary with a Blu-ray release where people have a chance to look at this material in Blu-ray quality, which will be terrific. And so hopefully we can help them with that as well. because I just love these sorts of projects. They're projects of passion. And it just makes me feel like I'm 12 years old again. It's really exciting.
I know. It's like watching this together. I mean, we were able to sit and geek out for a week, just looking at this stuff, appreciating it as adults.
It's great
but,
great to be doing it and having Ray around still to ask questions of. I mean, he's nearly 90 years old, and it's wonderful to look at the stuff, have questions, and to be able to go straight to Ray and sometimes get answers, but sometimes get, I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
I'll tell you, I laughed at that a few years ago, but it's amazing, because he's got such a long history doing this stuff. I mean, some of the stuff we looked at, Pete, was 70 years old. Or more.
It was, yeah. Some of it
we
was.
We looked at some stuff that was probably pushing 80, because I think.
Well, there's some World War II stuff in there, wasn't there?
Right, but not only that, there's the stuff he did as a young teenager.
Yeah, there was.
Remember those dinosaur things
it
with
was.
the
From
hinged,
the 30s,
hinged triceratops mouth? I think that would have been. He said he started when he was around 12 or 13 after Kong.
33,
33, probably right after Kong, I reckon.
Yeah.
Probably days after Kong.
Yeah.
So, and I think some of that's what was there.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just so that if you're listening to this and you're a Harryhausen fan, which I guess you have to be if you are actually listening to this, otherwise you're crazy. This is something to look forward to.
Those are mutually exclusive, by the way, of course.
There's, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. And I think that Tony and Ray have got a few more things over in London as well that they can put into the documentary. There's been a lot of, what's happened in the last, I guess, year or 2 years is that with great assistance from Tony Dalton, there's been a real compiling of the archive, if you like. I think they have looked at every drawing, every storyboard, everything that Ray's had in his attic and his different garages in London and Los Angeles, and they really have got everything of Ray's life that still exists together and catalogued, and it's been terrific work. And I think vital work to do while we still have Ray with us, obviously. Very
paperwork and artwork and script notions and storyboards and production drawings and
so it's never been better organised than it is now, which is great news. Really terrific to see happen. And all the books that are coming out too, that's the other thing. I mean, when I was a kid, Ray had written a book, the Film Fantasy Scrapbook, which I didn't own a copy initially. It was at the local library, but I had it for years. I would just renew it. I'd renew the book at the library, and no one else had it for like 2 or 3 years.
That's why
it was in my house.
No one else in New Zealand became a stop motion animator.
And it was the original edition. It was the black and white one.
Yeah.
It didn't have the Golden Voyager Sinbad color update in it. It was the original version, and it was just I just got to know every inch of that book and every word in it. But that was all that there was, really, and a few magazine articles occasionally with Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine. But now, these wonderful books that Ray has been doing with Tony, and also there's that other 3-volume Harryhausen series that's coming out, that the first volume's been released. That looks to be terrific. There's just it's exciting to have all this wonderful material to enjoy.
Oh, one of the many things we found in that garage, not to belabor the, delving into that archive, but the one thing that was wonderful that'll show up is some of the behind the scenes photographs, Hasselblad negative photographs, so they're very high quality, of his animation setups on Seventh Voyage. There's a lot of you Cyclops fans are going to be in for a treat, because there's a lot of stuff with the Cyclops on the animation table, with his feet screwed into the bottom,
And these are like 2.5 inch square Neegs, aren't they?
Yeah, and
very like the sharpest that the Cyclops will ever be seen, ever.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
Yeah, I think.
Best quality.
But also, I'm very Cyclops-centric, but there's also a lot of stuff Lofgren building miniatures and all kinds of things. I mean, it's a really, it was a huge treasure trove. But yeah, the Cyclops, another good word for the Cyclops. You know, I mean, Peter, you said you are too. I mean, it's an amazing piece of design and realization, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's one of the great movie creatures.
It's one of my favorite movie stars, you know?
And The Seventh Voyage, I have to say that out of all the Harryhausen movies, The Seventh Voyage, to me, is my favorite as a complete movie. That is one movie that I don't just sit there waiting for the animation. I actually enjoy the film in its entirety. More so than Jason, I have to admit. The Seventh Voyage is a terrific movie.
Well, I know this is Ray's favorite, but The Seventh Voyage was the one where it all came together for the first time. And there's something, even though we don't know it, watching it, there's something I think that is something you can't take, you can't separate from it. The fact that it is the first time all this stuff was happening, the first time it all came together in color with, Bernard Herrmann and these amazing creatures and this amazing outpouring of imagination from Ray. I mean,
and also the way that the film's structured with the Cyclops being a regular character. He's almost like a supporting actor in the movie. It does get away from the curse of the animated sequence and then, 10 or 15 minutes to wait for the next animated sequence, which is a tricky episodic structure that was always, a little bit of a problem to these films. But The Seventh Voyage doesn't have that quite in that way. It's a little bit more integrated, I guess.
Well, they get right to the problem with the shrinking Kathy Grant on their honeymoon, which is going to ruin anybody's day, or just before their marriage, I mean. And so there are a lot of reasons to get things set right. War between Baghdad and Chandra being but one of them. But it's a very simple fairy tale storybook movie, but the simplicity works for it, I think, wonderfully. It's a very good picture.
So these interiors that we're looking at were filmed in a studio in Rome, the Palantino studio, which apparently is a very small series of stages in Rome. I don't know whether it still survives. So the entire movie was basically shot in Italy, the locations as well as these studio interiors, but not the creatures. Harryhausen's creatures were shot back in London. So we're coming up to another classic Harryhausen animation sequence. Something to look forward to.
An awfully good one. This is just, again, simple choreography of the actors, but very strong, Yeah, I mean, it's you're throwing the look to the back and then to the front and then the shield and then I mean, it's really, for a lockdown camera, there's a lot going on.
Yep.
But
I love the set.
Nothing compared to this. Isn't it good? Yeah.
It's got definitely got a Doré-inspired feel, hasn't it? With the dark foreground and the overhanging foreground branches, and you can definitely see Ray going for the Gustave Doré.
Yeah, and walking on the set when all's said and done and saying, "This is not bad."
No, Doré was a Victorian artist, we should say, that used to do wonderful engravings in Victorian times. And
illustrations of Dante's Inferno particularly
a big
were
fan
appealing
of his,
to him.
Yeah.
But look at this thing, this thing holding a human puppet, which is probably evident to many, but it's still a fine piece of work, and the design, just
very good animation with that puppet. Very good animation with the human puppet, let alone the Cyclops, the Hydra.
The Hydra, yeah, but my God, the idea. This is where Ray's so strong because he gets, the realization is one thing, but just to come up with it, just to have the imagination to come up with this character, looking the way it does, and then putting it into 3 dimensions and getting it to move the way it does. I mean, there's a lot of creativity in a lot of avenues going on here.
I've always been confused by the Hydra's color. Because if you look at some photographs in the books that show the animation model as it is today, it's very green.
Yeah.
And yet his photographs as blue, whether that's filtration or lighting or whether it's, I don't know whether it's been repainted, whether somebody's repainted the model, but it definitely doesn't look the same.
Let's ask him. I'll try to make a note to call him before he records his animation or his narration track on Friday. Maybe he can tell us. I would guess it was the filtration. Sometimes, one of the things that happens is that when you're actually rephotographing the background plate, the color, the color doesn't photograph as truly as it might, green being one of the most difficult ones. But I suspect he was using blue light on it,
Now, is this puppet the one that you found in the garage, Randy?
Yes, and it wasn't small.
Is the actual one?
Yeah,
no?
we found what was left. We found the armature.
The Hydra was
puppet
quite
was
big,
gone.
wasn't it? The Hydra is like 3 feet long or something.
Must have been.
Yeah,
because this thing was 10 inches, eight and a half,
right.
10 inches long. The Jason puppet.
And what was the condition of the Jason?
The Jason
puppet like?
The puppet was gone. It's just It was just recognizable from the fact that it was a human character who had the little tunic still. It had enough of that little tunic and enough of the little adornments on it that are.
Now that sword plunge, if anyone wants to go back and look at it again on the Blu-ray, that sword plunge is a great piece of interaction where Todd Armstrong thrusts the sword forward. He was holding a prop sword, and when it was at the end of his reach, he let the sword go. He dropped it, and it fell onto the floor. And what Ray did is he lined up the sword with a miniature sword that he put into the belly of the Hydra, and he put a rock, I believe, in position so that as Todd Armstrong's sword fell away, it went behind a miniature rock. So it was a piece of sleight of hand. And
I thought it just went behind the Hydra, but maybe it bounced.
Did it?
Yeah, I know it goes behind the Hydra, but perhaps it bounces, and he did have a rock where it disappeared. But that's just an appetizer for the one that's coming up, which is when the skeleton, the sword in the skeleton's rib cage.
I always thought the Hydra scene was unusually short, but then I realized, of course, that it is only the appetizer for what's coming up. It's only half a scene because it sets up the teeth, which we're about to pay off very shortly. So there's a reason why he didn't go to huge length with the Hydra scene. But we should say that Ray never kept notes as he was animating, in the sense that the Hydra has 7 heads, and so he's frame by frame, he's having to say, this head's going up, this one's going down, this one's going to open its mouth, this one's going to twist sideways, this one's going to duck down. And then each frame he'd have to go back and remember which head was doing what. And normally you'd imagine somebody writing it all down on a bit of paper in case they forget, but Ray said that he never took notes. He just would shut himself away, he wouldn't answer the telephone, he wouldn't talk to anybody, he would just get into this very contained headspace where he kept it all in his head and just animated it. And he instinctively knew what was going up and what was going down. Very confusing. And the skeleton fight's even more extreme version of the same thing.
Yeah, and I've never gotten an answer about how long it really took. He says about 4 months, and I believe it. An awful lot of work, because a lot of the time the skeletons are on wires, of course. So it's not only are they tied down. I mean, one of the easiest things to animate from a stop motion point of view, as speaking as somebody who spent a lot of time on his feet in a black room, one of the easiest things to animate is a character just standing there, sort of vamping, shifting weight from one foot to another. But every time you move the foot, lift a foot, you've got to unscrew the foot, which is affixed to the animation table from the bottom by a threaded hole into which a screw and a wing nut goes. And then you unthread it, you set it down again on a new hole, either drilling a new hole or using a pre-drilled hole. I think Ray preferred pre-drilled. Then that takes time because you've got to rethread the thing. And also between steps, sometimes if the puppet were heavy enough that the that the ankle joint couldn't hold it up on one foot, he'd put an invisible wire over a C-stand as a counterbalance. You know, he'd have a counterbalance on the other side to take most of the weight off the puppet. I think there's a little of that.
The skeleton fight, you got to imagine, you're looking at 7 skeletons.
They're all walking.
They've got a head, they've got arms, joints, which is a shoulder, an elbow, a wrist. They have fingers that are moving. Then they have hips, knees, ankles. So you're literally, you're literally, each frame, you're moving potentially 150 joints each frame. And you're having to remember... Each time you go frame by frame, you're having to remember where each of those 150 joints, what direction it was heading and what speed. Because if a skeleton is making a chopping motion with its arm, then it's going to do big moves. So it's going to be, the chop is only going to take, a half dozen frames or 12 frames. If it's moving its arm slowly, then the arm movement might be 50 or 60 frames. So, the speed of the movement is dictating how far you're moving. And you've got to remember, is this arm holding the sword, is this the arm that's going fast or the arm that's going slow? Because each frame, you have to be consistent. Otherwise, it starts to look very, very jerky
not
if
only
you're not
that,
consistent.
on top of that, you've got him fighting, sword fighting live action characters, which means that when you're on frame 46, you have to set up for a sword strike that has to happen at frame 72. It has to, because that's where it's happening on the live action plate.
Yeah.
And you've got to keep all of those in mind and do all your anticipations. It's not just about making the contact on frame 72. It's all the setup to it, And Ray also often had a copy of the plate in a moviola, so he could see where the heck he was, Because
he'd need to.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few interesting photographs. I remember that only a relatively few years ago, he allowed the release of the most telling photograph, which was a shot of the stuntmen all with numbers on their backs.
Yeah.
And I know that he was very wary about releasing that one. And it took him literally 30 years before that photograph was allowed to be released. He was one of his personal photographs, and I remember it was a big deal to him to actually show the world, because he was a magician that didn't want to reveal all of his tricks for a long time. Now we're going to see the skeletons rising up out of the ground, which is a terrific moment. Have a close look, because they rise up. They're on little platforms underneath the miniature ground, and they're on the end of a threaded screw. The platform's on a screw, so he's rotating the screw around, which is raising the platforms up and allowing the skeletons to rise. And he's got some cork, pieces of chopped up cork to represent the dirt, and they're rolling away, animated frame by frame, being held by wax, just so that they're sticky enough that he can animate them one frame at a time, and they won't just sort of roll away of their own accord. So just have a look at this moment with them rising. It's one of the great moments. It's I remember this is I remember watching this and tears being in my eyes when I saw it when I was younger. It was I'd read about it, and I'd seen photos of it, and then the film came on TV, and I was so excited, because I'd seen other Harryhausen movies before, but I hadn't seen it. And in New Zealand, we only had one TV channel, and it was a big deal. Here it is.
I took the bus into Oakland to see this when it came out, having seen.
Oh, you were lucky. You got to see them on the. You just got to see them in a theater,
man,
right? I've never seen this film in a theater, not once ever. But this Blu-ray will be very much the same. So there's our cork that's rolling frame by frame with wax, and here are our skeletons
with nice evil expressions. They're not benign like the real thing. They're
great brows.
Yeah.
One of these skeletons is the skeleton that fights Sinbad in the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and Ray
brought us to New Zealand.
still has these 7 skeletons, but he's forgotten which is the Sinbad one, hasn't he? He's got the 7 skeletons still, and they're in very good condition still, but he frustratingly, he can't remember which is the one has done double duty in Sinbad.
But he brought one of them to New Zealand,
He
didn't he?
brought one to New Zealand, and we animated him.
Yes, we did.
We
Ray
animated
Harryhausen skeleton animated by Peter Jackson and Randy Cook for a shockingly few number of frames. It was such an afterthought. I really wish we'd gone for it. Maybe we can talk him into letting us hold on to it for a little longer and have a.
Yeah. Oh, it was great.
God, it
Ray
was so-
Ray
God.
brought it round to our house, and and I just thought, I just asked him if I got my camera, could I just animate this for a bit? And you were there, and God, I
pushed him
can't
around.
believe
It was
that I did that.
Well, it was. I mean, it was amazing.
So cool.
It was amazing to just hold this artifact that had meant so much to me, and I'm sure you felt the same.
Oh, yeah. Well,
it was
I
just,
built
here
a
it is. It's the
skeleton
thing
when I
that
was a
got you
kid.
into. It's the thing that got you into the movies. You know.
Yeah. So this scene caused concern at the time. I know when they were worried about the censorship. I mean, looking at it today, you don't really imagine that the time, but they thought that this scene could get them an R rating because of it being potentially too scary for children. It was some concern. This is a classic shot. The one of the three guys fighting the skeletons. that to me is that's one of the great animation shots. And now we get down into more fun choreography, which is a great mixture of humor and horror. I love the invention. That we should mention Fernando Poggi is the name of the sword master, stunt coordinator and sword master,
and Andrew Falls, a member of the House of Commons later.
Right.
And jumping through, here's Ray would sometimes use little.
Look at that close-up, big close-up of a tiny skeleton.
Oh, I know.
I mean, these models are about 10 inches tall.
And this is, if that,
tiny.
yeah. And
Tiny.
there's too much
they're
going
probably
on
eight
here
inches.
at once. These you can't even begin to discuss the technique here, really,
No.
because it's all going on at once, and many techniques per shot. I mean, the shot, there's even so you can get skeleton and both skeletons
Right.
on either side of a split. There's even a little miniature painted piece that this skeleton is running up that isn't live action. It's just a painted applique in front of which he runs, so the other skeleton can run in front of that. Now we're back to a real split. But I mean, he's very, very, very inventive. And speaking of humor, look at that, the limp arm here. I love this guy who falls over and his arm dangles,
Yeah. Because one of the fun dilemmas
here's the one.
of
Here's the
scene,
one. That one.
Yeah,
That
he's
swap.
got
How many times have you looked at that swap trying to figure out where he made the switch?
and where the sword
It went.
Where the
Actually,
sword went. Where there wasn't
the
anything
secret-
to hide the sword.
The secret is next time you watch it. The secret I finally realized is in the speed of the arm falling. So
Right.
so watch. I
Okay.
mean, that's
All right.
because he's hiding it in plain sight, Peter. I mean, it just goes behind the arm and then behind the ground, and there's nothing special there. It's just sheer cleverness.
When I first saw this film on TV, it was the days before video recorders. It was before, as I say, we had one TV channel in New Zealand, and I was not going to see this film ever again. But we did have a television show that you could request that they repeated certain favourite scenes, and so I wrote a letter and I watched. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and I watched this thing for the next few weeks, and finally my letter got read out, and they replayed the skeleton fight just for me on TV on Sunday afternoon, and that was exciting.
Well,
And the skeleton fight actually was responsible for me going to hospital for 3 or 4 days. Actual fact, very strange story.
Very strange story. When are you going to tell that
Well,
one? We're at the end here, aren't we?
I know.
Oh, it's a shame. Well, you got to. That's the next edition, I guess.
Yeah,
I
there's
haven't
only
had this
seconds
good a
left.
time watching a movie in a long time, Peter, than watching this with you. I mean, this was a seminal part of both our childhoods in two different hemispheres and two different epochs. But
Well, thank you. It's been great. I've learned quite a few things that I didn't know before, which is terrific. And thanks for everybody putting up with us and inviting us into your homes.
I hope some of you have found this the film inspiring. It's hard not to be thrilled by it. Thanks again, Peter.
It is inspirational.
It's been good watching it with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Randy.